Hello there, Kev Feeney from Cheshire Wildlife Trust. It's been nearly 3 months to the day since beavers came back to Cheshire after being extinct for more than 400 years. So we thought we'd put together a video to show you the site and some of the things the beavers have been up to. Currently on the boardwalk, which is part of the circular footpath on Hatchmere Nature Reserve, and you can see the fencing just behind me. And this is the closest the public can get to seeing the beavers. Right, so we go for a little walk around. I'll show you what we can find. Okay, so I'm just walking up through the release site now, and the first thing I've noticed is a trail running from the brook up towards, there's an old pond on the edge of the release site. I'll just show you now. As you can see, it's quite a smooth trail. Beavers create these beaver highways. They kind of drag their belly and they've got quite big claws, and it heads up towards the edge of the fencing, and you can see an open pond. We'll just follow that up. Okay, so we followed that trail and we've ended up at this pond here. It's always been pretty void of wildlife. It was fully vegetated and didn't hold much water, but the beavers seem to have adopted it, and they've got in, they've created open areas of water. They seem to have been feeding on kind of roots, different types of vegetation, also eating bramble. And it's quite far away from the release pond and the brook, but they seem to have made it home. Okay, just to the edge of the pond you can see lots of signs of feeding. Nibbled branches, these are about 1 inch across. Shows that the beavers are feeding. What they tend to do is break a branch off and strip all the bark, and that's their food. Okay, and now where the release site kind of opens up, we've got quite an open meadow. You can see the release pond is just over there. Behind me is the fencing. We do check our fencing twice a week just for any damages that might occur, things like trees falling or beavers digging out, or potentially something trying to dig in. We've had no problems so far, but if you are passing along on the footpath, do let us know if you see any problems. Okay, so I'm now at the inflow. This is where the water enters the site, and every evening around 7:30, we know this because we pick the beavers up on camera traps like the one just over here. We know that they're active from about 7:30, and they're active all night until dawn. And even at dawn you'll tend to find them around the edge of the pond, and every night they come up the brook straight up, and then they come out either side of the brook and they patrol the fencing. They're very territorial animals, so they patrol the fencing every night. The first night we released them, we found footprints over the entire site. The next day they just covered the whole thing. Footprints are really distinctive, they're like a giant rat print, and you can also see the trails that they leave behind. I'll show you one of these now. Okay, so you can just about make out there's a smooth edging to the edge of the fence that runs towards the brook. This is where the beavers move along. It's usually covered in footprints, but we've had that much rain lately, they've all been washed away. We should find some a little bit later on. Okay, so I'm just making my way along the brook, and you can see here the brook's quite open at the moment. Before the beavers arrived, this was full of vegetation. You can see a lot of flag iris, and there's a lot of bulrush, and also things like false water parsnip, watercress. And the beavers seem to have gone through that, and water parsnip is quite toxic to us. I assume it's toxic to beavers because they've thrown it out the water. They don't want it. They're all about efficiency. They want the foods that they like, and they seem to have eaten all the watercress and pulled up kind of the tubers from the bulrush and the flag iris, and seem to be making their way through those. But what this has done is it's opened up the flow of water. We've now got open water rather than vegetation, which is mean the water's flowing much better. Okay, you can see the height of Ted in front of me. Handy border terrier for measure, and you can see the height of this hawthorn that's been nibbled off. They've gone for anything small, and they're quite happy to reach up to get it. Okay, so the one thing I've learnt about beavers is that they are a little bit lazy in some ways. They've spent the first month or two just going around clearing all the vegetation that we'd cut back to put the fencing in, dragging that away to the water to feed on it there. Then they've gone around and taken anything small, anything that's kind of one bite to them. Things up to about 1 inch or 2, and I assume they're starting to get a bit more hungry. It's cold weather here, we've had the highest rainfall in 21 years, and we're starting to see a lot more signs of feeding. You can see here lots of nibbled branches, and they'll take things down quite a good size. You can see them making their way through this willow here. Willow is a favourite food by far, low in tannin, high in moisture, and quite sugar rich. So they tend to go through from all sides, but this is a good maybe 18 inches off the ground. You can see that they've taken it down so that they can reach the smaller branches further along. So this is another beaver highway, but it reaches between the release pond just here, and it goes through straight to the brook. And you can see that they've started to excavate, probably where the soil is falling as they climb out. They're quite big, and there's a good chance that they'll make this into a beaver canal, so they can just swim across. Okay, so we're right on the edge of the pond now. The beavers are just around the corner, and you can see just next to me, this was an artificial lodge that we put together for the release. It was just a couple of log piles, and we put a lot of brash on top just to give them some kind of shelter if the weather turned bad. They never used it, but they did eat it. They've eaten all the brash off the top, and then they've started to use it as a bit of a food cache. You often see the male or the female sitting just in the food cache just here. Okay, this is a close-up of the food cache. You can see where the bark's been stripped off the willow, and these branches have been dragged in here and piled up. It's a nice safe area. They can get their back up against the trees, so nothing can sneak up on them, and an easy escape to the water. The great thing about removing the bark is it creates a food source for lots of other animals. We found lots of snails, water snails in particular, just feeding off the cambium, the living layer of the tree, and that's a food source that they would never usually get. Right, just next to me, this pile of twigs, this is the beginning of the beaver's lodge, so they're probably in there right now. And it started off made of straw. It was the straw from the release boxes, and they carried it across the pond and nested in that. It was a bed of bramble, and then they dug a burrow underneath. Sadly I put my foot through it, scared them out, and they just patched that hole up with twigs, and that patch has just slowly increased. You can see it's building up, but they're tucked away in there now, keeping away from the worst of the weather. We have had a few incidents with high levels of rain where basically they've been flooded out, but it's no problem for them. They've got really thick fur to keep away from it, but they're keeping nice and snug today. Okay, I mentioned before that what the beavers are doing by removing the bark is they're exposing the sapwood of the tree, so the living part, and it's a food source that little tiny snails like this would never usually get. And these snails are a massive food source for loads of wading birds. It's really fantastic to see these guys doing well. So I hope you enjoyed our whistle-stop tour of the Cheshire beavers and what they've been up to over the last few months. We could have filled hours with indication of feeding, lots of trails, but I've been unsuccessful in finding a footprint, and we'll be sure to give you an update in a few more months. Just like to say a big thank you to all our supporters and all our members for making this happen, and you can still donate and you can still join up as a member if you're not, and please do. We could bring more beavers back to Cheshire.